Welcome to the Horror Hangout, a podcast where film fans watch the best and worst horror movies of all time and talk about them. Today's episode is a very, very, very special bonus episode. That's three verys there, chatting all about one of the films premiering at FrightFest later this week. My name is Ben Errington, and I'm joined today by regular co-host Mr.
Andy Conduit Turner. Hello.
Hello, and we are joined by two very special guests, director Douglas Schulze and Hellraiser icon and horror royalty Doug Bradley, here to discuss new movie Thorns, which has its premiere at FrightFest in London on Saturday, the 26th of August. Welcome, Doug and Doug. Doug Squared.
There you go.
Doug.
Yes, Doug Squared.
Yep.
Welcome. Thanks.
Hi.
Hello. How are you both doing? Thanks for joining us first, and congratulations on Thorns.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited to world premiere in London. So
amazing.
Exciting times and a great privilege to us. Thank you for you guys, the creators, and the marketing teams doing the distribution. We've had a chance to watch Thorns already ahead of the premiere, so really excited to talk to you about it today. Before we get into the film itself, we'll do it in order, shall we? And Doug Schulze, you're closest to me on the screen. Tell me a little bit about your history as a filmmaker. What got you to the point of having Thorns out? Where did you fall in love with the genre of all the films you could have made? How did you end up with horror?
wow. Well, I've loved horror films my entire life, and I'm particularly keen on an era of horror cinema, and that being in the late 70s on in through the 80s. And we kind of jokingly refer to it as the era of practical effects before, computerized effects really took over. And that was the impetus for Thorns. I wanted to do an homage to the genre, to that era specifically. And so this was an exciting opportunity, to do a film where all of the effects are done on set, and which presents scheduling nightmares and all hosts of things, but it was a wonderful experience. So
yeah. Wonderful, thank you. And Doug Bradley here. I mean, as a man who probably is a lot of people's influence and introduction to horror and the thing that maybe drew them into it, I know certainly growing up I saw your face on a lot of video shop covers, but what drew you to the genre of everything you could have acted in?
Well, I was a fan of horror movies as a teenager before I knew I wanted to be an actor. And going back, I mean, as a kid, it was ghosts with me. Obsessed with ghosts, couldn't get enough of them. Scared me stupid, so the bedroom lights were on a lot, but you couldn't keep me away from them at the same time. But then as a teenager, I come in slightly ahead of the period that Doug has just instanced. I really cut my teeth. Granada television, which won't mean anything to American audiences, but independent television company in the northwest of England. I was born and raised in Liverpool, and just after every Monday night after news at 10:30, they had Appointment with Fear, and they basically screened the entire Hammer back catalogue. So that was really my ground floor introduction to horror, and then discovering the classic Universal movies on the back of that, and onwards and onwards and onwards. When I became an actor, when I became a professional actor, although I had been working in the theatre with Clive Barker for 10 years before that. So, it being Clive, horror was never far from our front door, though not exclusively so. It wasn't with any expectation or specific ambition to work in in the genre. This is I'm talking about around 1982, 1983 at this point. You can't afford to make those decisions as an actor. It is a question of will rock for food. So I didn't have any specific ambition to work in the genre. I didn't know that 3 years later Clive would ask me to be in Hellraiser, but he did, and that sort of changed the landscape a bit.
Well, it certainly did. It changed the landscape, and then obviously, Andy, you're talking about everyone's first instances of horror. It was one of my earliest actual horror memories was seeing the VHS cover for Hellraiser, and for the first time, just thinking, "What is that? What does that possibly mean?" and from then, like, my love of the genre has just blossomed. And I guess similar to you, Doug, in a way that, like, you were scared of ghosts, I was scared. I think mine was kind of zombies. What you're the most scared of, you tend to gravitate towards that more than anything, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. My personal memory there is being scared of a combination of Doug here and Robert England. My dad has a much younger brother. So he was a teenager when I was growing up as a kid, and his bedroom had a poster of Fred Krueger, poster of Pinhead on his wall. Didn't like going in my uncle's room when I went to visit my grandparents.
I don't want to go in there.
But then, as I got older, those were the films that, when I could go to a video shop, and my, we call them laissez-faire parents of the 80s and 90s were like, yeah, you can rent that out. What's that number on the corner? Doesn't matter.
We'll jump into talking about Thorns real quick then. So just a few details on the film. An ex-priest working for NASA is sent to investigate a remote observatory that went silent after receiving a mysterious radio signal from deep space. Upon arrival, he discovers the signal has opened a portal, unleashing a thorned monster. So where were the origins of the idea for this film, and how did this collaboration between the two of you come together?
Okay. The impetus for the idea, again, stems all the way back to the era of the 80s and the physical makeup effects films that I so loved. As far as the relationship between Doug and I, we have a mutual friend, Doug's manager. And I've worked with Chris Rowe before, and he made the introduction. I've always wanted to work with Doug Bradley, but I wasn't quite certain whether this project would have been a fit. And it was actually Chris's idea to approach Doug. And the minute he did, suggested, I was, elated and, waiting to see if Doug might be interested in coming on board the project. So, yeah.
Amazing. And I guess what drew you, Doug, to the project? Was it just you got to look at the script and then you realized that it was something you wanted to get your teeth into?
Sure. I just pick up on the back end of what Doug was saying. So Chris then approached me and he vouched for Doug. And I said what I always say, which is, okay, well, let's look at the script. And that's always the starting point. Unless as I've said before, unless somebody's offering me stupid amounts of money that I really don't care what the script is like. That doesn't happen, by the way. But one fine day, and with due respect to Doug, that was not the case here, though the offer he made was very decent. So you read the script, and either the script grabs your attention or it doesn't, and it did. And you pay closer attention to the part that you're being offered, and either it grabs your attention or it doesn't, and it did. It's a well-written screenplay. Certainly with the character that I'm playing, the well, you described him as an ex-priest. I'm not sure he's ex, is he, Doug?
Well,
He's-
there is a character, yeah, there, your character is obviously the archbishop.
Yes.
And we were debating at one point the difference between the bishop and the archbishop. And I think you preside over more clergy in your area of the world, right?
Right.
According to the story.
He's still kind of, in my mind, in his own strange ways, kind of still active, though I think the archbishop bit maybe a bit more of a front these days.
Yeah.
But we're actually, I mean, all of that was never really explored, because we only ever see him in tight close up anyway, really. So the part, I mean, from what I've outlined, the part is intriguing. An archbishop who is working for NASA, as it were, or unnamed space agency, and this idea that because the strange things that are going on with the rogue space station sending out strange signals is happening in the heavens, and the heavens are, roughly speaking, God's domain, that this should also come under the purview of the church, as well as I'm not sure that NASA would agree to this idea, but it grabbed me. And then beyond that, it's an apocalypse movie. It kind of roots itself in the book of Revelation to some extent. I'm very much an atheist, so I don't really buy into all of that, but I love the language and the poetry and the imaginative ideas involved with that. So all of it just grabbed me, and so Chris negotiated, came back to me. I said yes, and
here we are.
Yeah. And how did you react when you got the yes, Doug?
Oh yeah. Well, it was certainly made a segment of my filmic career, filling that bucket list, so to speak. And I've had the pleasure of working with some wonderful actors over the years, and Doug was amazingly well prepared, and so forth. Yeah. So.
Doug raised a really good point there, and conceptually, it's one of the things that I gravitate towards watching this movie. Call me old-fashioned. I like it when things fit together, and I love a connection in a story. And I really thought what you built there to kind of connect elements of faith with elements of science and finding links between them, and having a story where you could look at both of these, in many ways, diametrically opposite viewpoints of the world, right? How they could approach the same phenomenon, the same signal in very different ways and see those things unfold. Conceptually, it's a nice part for the film to begin. I think having Doug there to present and have that as the face of the church side of the things and how that agency is looking at it is a really interesting point. But Doug Schulze, I noticed that looking at it with your background as well, not the first time you've touched on a combination of this as well. I noticed that, is it John, your lead actor, has played a character named Gabriel Goodman, at very least in one of your previous movies as well. Is it a name you really liked? I'm not sure if there's any connection between them, or is it just
alliteration
a
is
character
good
that you wanted to bring into another film and have another turn with John starring in it as well?
Yeah, we joked on set that we had unfinished business, right? But I've always been intrigued with stories having to do with spirituality and lost faith. I was born and raised Catholic, and I don't really practice. I find aspects of religion, many aspects, frightening, but at the same time, I think everyone wants to believe in positive, hopeful things. And so I tackled the idea years ago And way back when there was a thing called Blockbuster Video, and the film we made was it actually did relatively well as this Blockbuster exclusive. And I worked with the actor John Bennett, who returns in this film. And John really hadn't really pursued much acting since. And this script came around, and I just thought it very fitting, an idea to approach him about coming on board again to play in Thorns. So yeah,
Amazing. Get the band back together.
there you
Exactly. So I mean, Doug, how was your preparation for this role compared to other iconic characters? Obviously, you didn't have to spend any time in the makeup
Less time
chair.
in a makeup chair, right?
It's more slightly less time.
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if that actually may not have been quite that long. You know, the script.
Lots of
And you're
dialogue
right.
as well. Lots of dialogue to get your teeth into. Which is always
Plenty of
a pleasure.
words. So learn them.
Mm.
Let them sink in. I am not actually an archbishop. So, you know, you have to readjust your head to think of yourself as being one, albeit an archbishop of a peculiar caste in this case.
Suppose as an atheist, playing characters that have a lot of religious connections and connotations must be interesting, at least.
Yes, I mean, I describe myself as a religious atheist, which is partly to confuse Christians, which is easily done and always amusing, but also to kind of rescue the religious bit from organized religions who think they invented it, and particularly the monotheistic religions, you know, being aware that the urge to religion predates those religions. It's always been there. The sense of the numinous and so forth. And I've always been very interested in mythology and folklore. I've always said that I would have a much easier relationship with Christianity if it would accept that it's operating in a mythological landscape. Specifically, if you look at the life of Christ and you look at the life of Dionysus from the Greek myths side by side, they're almost identical. It's when people want me to believe that these things actually happened that I kind of, you know, sidle off to the side saying, don't know, virgin births. Not sure. You know, and I was raised in a religious household. My grandfather was a Scottish Baptist minister, with all the terrifying connotations that may come with. Fundamentalist, Calvinist persuasions, predestination, predetermination, all of that. And every word of the Bible was the divinely inspired word of God, not to be changed, challenged, edited, or, you know, modified in any way, shape, or form. Huge influence on me as a boy, but I think not necessarily in the ways that he was expecting.
Yeah. It does feel like you've got the qualifications in place though to play some of these characters.
Yeah, well, I you know, so I grew up in a I was raised Methodist. The church was very central to my parents' lives, and therefore it was to me as a boy growing up, and I just kind of believed it because, you know, it was the air that I breathed. As a teenager, I think I started to think, you know, not sure about this, so I think I graduated to the non-committal position of agnostic before, you know, finally saying, you know what, this is bullshit. And you know, when you look at what we know now about the universe we live in and the planet we live on and the solar system and ourselves and how we originated, stuff that that knowledge has grown exponentially in the last 50 years. I don't think I have a very comforting worldview. I don't think the universe is a very comforting place. And I understand that religion brings that sense of comfort and reassurance to people. I'm not sure that they necessarily have any reason to suppose, that that's the case. We could blink out as a planet tomorrow if the right asteroid came along. I think the universe, largely speaking, would shrug its shoulders and carry on, and would barely be aware that this little blue dot in an unremarkable corner had gone.
Do you think that anybody watching the movie Thorns will come away with any of these thoughts? Were any of these discussions on set as well when discussing this? Because obviously it's quite a complex.
I'm certainly coming away with them now. I'm gonna have to little sit down and think about the universe when I finish this film.
I might need 10 minutes at least.
I think I have a Lovecraftian view of the universe. I think Lovecraft believed it was a cold, unloving and unlovely place. And I think I rather agree with him. It's an extraordinary and magical and amazing and beautiful place. But, rather indifferent to us at the same time. I don't recall us engaging in these discussions, Doug. I mean, it was a fairly tight shoot, it was more about learn your lines and turn up on time and don't bump into the furniture than worry yourself about about the larger metaphysical issues.
This is good pub conversation for after we've had screenings of the movie. In the few minutes that we have, I want to make sure that we cover the bits. Obviously, we're screening at FrightFest. Doug, remind me, is this your European or world premiere over here?
Yeah, it's the world premiere. We're starting here, and later in October
Universe premiere.
Universe premiere.
The universal premiere, and then we'll be going to Spain, and we just were invited to Stockholm, Sweden for the Monsters of Film too. So
nice.
So it's catching fire, and we're choosing our festivals carefully. We were invited to a few others, but we wanted to wait for the right rollout. And FrightFest is, I've never been to London, so I'm looking forward to it.
Certainly one of our favorites as well. And it's lovely to have you joining us as well. So for the longer term folks, obviously those that aren't able to make it to a festival this season, I know other things will likely be in discussion. So where is the best place to follow you, to see what's coming next, to see when we get distribution and where they'll be able to watch it at home as well? What other platforms they would be best to find you on and follow more about Thorns?
Well, we have a social media page through Facebook. If you look up Thorns movie, you should be able to find us there. Beyond that, we hope to find an amicable distributor early in 24. So stay tuned for that, and we'll pass along the information too. So
brilliant, sounds good. Well, I don't want to keep you and make you late for your next one. I know you've got a gamut of these to run before FrightFest. Just 3 sleeps to go at time of recording, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us, and then never sleep again thinking about these existential questions of the universe.
No way.
Yeah, this has been a fascinating discussion. I would love to carry on the other side of the films. We'll see you in the bars around the places, I'm sure. But as we leave you, I'll give you a quick fire question to finish off. Both involved in horror, both horror fans, very quickly for each of you. I'll start with Doug Bradley. If you're introducing people to a horror film, they ask you for a horror film to pick and sit down and watch, what do you serve up to your friends and family as a horror recommendation?
God, wow. It would depend on the individuals, I think. I mean, my favorite horror film remains The Bride of Frankenstein. You know, some people say, oh, it's old, it's black and white, can't watch that. Halloween, the first Halloween, it's a brilliant piece of filmmaking and damn good horror film.
Fantastic
choice.
Go with that
Perfect
one.
choice. Can't
Name
argue with
it,
that.
Doug Schulze, what's your shot? You got one choice. What are you putting in front of me?
Wow.
Pressure.
Well, yeah. Gosh, yeah. You know, I certainly concur with Doug on the idea that there are so many different ways you can approach this. There are some people who have more of an appetite for, you know, certain aspects of the genre, you know, special makeup effects and things like that. I would eventually get them to Hellraiser, right? But I probably wouldn't start them there. Maybe George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Again, like, you know, Doug was saying, some people may look at it as, you know, black and white, you know, 16 millimeter, you know, made a while ago, but there's something very, you know, visceral about it, and in its crudeness, and the independentness of it. I think it's still a very haunting and terrifying film, so it might be a good place to start.
Amazing picks. Thank you both so much. Ben, do you want to bring us home?
Sure. Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Doug and Doug. I realize I keep saying Doug and just looking at different areas of the screen, but it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, thanks both of you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. Thanks for taking the time. We're looking forward to seeing Thorns on the big screen. And yeah, so thanks to everybody for listening as well. If you enjoyed the show, become a patron over at patreon.com/horror hangout. And yeah, we will see everybody at FrightFest. We'll be at the event. We'll be covering it as well, so it'd be good to catch up. Thanks to you both for joining us, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye
Thank
for now,
you.
everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.